Welcome back, guys. We are here for our third color of our limited set review for Brothers War. We're going to be diving into all of the black cards, and Yanks is on the call with me. We'll be rating them 1 to 5 based on how we think they will perform in the average limited deck. Kind of both sealed and draft, and also cards will be, limited a little bit based on how synergistic they are. So some cards that might have strong potential, but also, need quite a bit of draft around will take a little bit of a hit in their ratings. So let's go ahead and start here with the Ashnod's Harvester. We have a 2-mana construct. When Ashnod's Harvester attacks, exile target card from a graveyard with Unearth. It is a 2-mana 3/2, which is kind of on rate, but colorless, easy to cast with Unearth, and has a nice little bonus ability. I think this card is actually quite playable. What do you think, Yanks?
Yeah, it's aggressive, obviously being a 3/1 for 2, but you get it twice. An exiling card from a graveyard, I mean, this has Unearth. This is the sort of thing you want to get out of people's graveyards.
Yeah, we have Unearth in the format, and there's a couple other things that I see like in Limited that usually happens. We usually get one like black spell that can do some recursions. Usually a creature can do some recurring. So this sort of ability oftentimes comes in handy. Pretty nice to have. So I mean, we usually rate just the vanilla, 2-mana 3/1s. We rate it at like a 1.5 or a 2, depending on how aggressive your deck wants to be. But with the Unearth, I think this is a nice little bonus, and you could get some good use out of it. I think this is probably closer to a 2.5 for me.
Yeah, I think it's right around there. You also get double triggers off of anything in the black-white deck that cares about 3 CMC or less, because this comes back a second time.
Yeah,
nice.
That's absolutely true. Okay, so we are in agreement there. We have Ashnod's Intervention, 1 mana for an instant spell that says until end of turn, target creature gets +2/+0 and gains when this creature dies, exile it from the battlefield and return it to its owner's hand. This is an interesting one. Normally, it costs 1 more, and it usually gives either indestructible or just flickers it, which is cool, but this costs 1 less and it returns it back to your hand, which, as Yanks just mentioned, could be beneficial because there is an archetype in black that wants to be playing these 3 CMC cards over and over again. ETBs could be very beneficial here. So I think it's an overall net negative to not just have it come back into play, but there is some uses. What do you think, Yanks?
Yeah, I think the interesting thing here to me is the second part of that clause, the or is put into exile from the battlefield, meaning you can use it on your own Unearth creatures. So if they would get exiled, you get them back.
Oh, okay.
Which is, I imagine, why it doesn't have the return it straight to play clause, because that could get abused pretty quickly.
Yeah, that makes sense. I like that. So, I mean, I think these cards are usually borderline playable for me. I'll run them from time to time if I'm a little short on playables. I think this is like a 2.
Yeah, I'm with you on that as a 2.
All right. Ashnod's Flesh Merchant, a 1-mana 1/1 human artificer that's a legendary and has Death Touch. When it attacks, you may sacrifice another creature. If you do, create a tapped Power Stone token. Pay 5, exile a creature from your graveyard, create a 3/3 tapped colorless zombie. Okay.
Yeah, 1-drop that's impactful in the late game is nice. You want Death Touch on cheap creatures, so that's good.
Yep.
I like this card. It's also, and we can get to it after we give a rating to it, very storyline flavorful for what her character is.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'm going to want to sack a lot of other creatures to make the Power Stones to enable this, and it only happens at a very specific time. So the first part of the text for me is pretty medium, but it's a 1-mana Death Toucher for 1. It's a 1/1 mana Death Toucher for 1 mana. And then the 5-mana late game is actually not a huge tax to just make 3/3 colorless things if you are able to exile a creature card from your graveyard, which shouldn't be hard to do later in the game when you have 5 mana. So I think this card is pretty good.
Yeah, I like it a lot. I mean, anytime you can find like a 1-drop or a 2-drop that's going to continue to play into the late game, you're always happy with that.
Absolutely. So for me, this is pretty close to, I would say it's like a 3, maybe even a 3/5.
Yeah, I think it's probably a 3, but there are going to be some decks, like if they're super creature heavy, or if you've got some sort of self mill. We've seen a couple cards that are like mill 3 off the top of your deck. Then it's going to move up to that 3/5 range.
Most of my creatures are pretty heavy in lands, and I'm not expecting this to crank out a ton of 3/3s. I think if my 1-mana 1/1 Death Touch makes 1 free 3/3, I'm pretty happy about it.
That's true.
So, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and say that this is a 3 in any deck, and I personally would give it a bump up if you do have that creature-heavy deck, or ways to make extra mana.
Yeah. Story time?
Sure. Which one? For the girl?
For Ashnod, yeah.
Let's go with.
So the Brothers War story is about Urza and Mishra, the two brothers, but ancillary characters, they each had a apprentice. Urza's apprentice is Tawnos, who we'll see in the multicolor portion of this set. Mishra's is Ashnod. And her role in the story was she was kind of a bit of a seductress almost, in that she would go after, she was trying to seduce Tawnos kind of, and seduce Mishra, you found out. But also, she was experimenting on combining artifice and organic beings. So basically, one of the cards from Antiquities, I believe, Ashnod's Transmigrant. Transmigrant are these like units that she created that were like, she took what you would call like the refuse of society, criminals, traitors, deserters, all that, and experimented on them and turned them into like these sort of mindless zombies that couldn't feel pain and would be like expendable shock troops, which is kind of basically what you're doing with that 5-mana ability. You're turning a creature and giving it another use after it's already kind of been discarded by society in her case.
That is very flavorful. Well done, Yanks. Did you give a rating on it? You said 3 as well, right?
I said 3, yeah. Yep.
Okay, cool. Battlefield Butcher, 3 mana for a human soldier. It's a 1/4, and you can pay 5 mana. You can tap it. Each opponent loses 2 life. This ability costs 1 less to cast for each creature card in your graveyard. Holy smokes. Late game, this is a 3 mana 1/4 that just taps and hits them for 2. I love it.
Yeah, we seem to see a 3 to 4 mana, big toughness creature that has this, like, everybody loses life, or in this case, opponents lose life ability in every set, but this might be one of the best ones we've seen.
This card is awesome. I think this card is actually pretty fantastic. 5 mana or no, like, if you 5 mana early, late game, basically free, I think it's great. I'm going to rate it at like a 3.
Yeah, I think I've got it as a 3 as well. It's a great mana sink for Power Stones, in addition to just being decreased to eventually 0.
It is going to kill people. It's going to win a lot of games, even though it isn't super powerful. It's the kind of card that's going to sneak in and get a lot of games.
How much are you looking forward to playing this in 2-Headed Giant?
Oh. I'm going to play so much 2HG. It's going to be great. I mean, it's no Outrider, but yeah, it's going to be pretty scary. All right, we have a Carrion Locust, 3 mana flying horror. It's a 2/1. When it enters the battlefield, exile target card from an opponent's graveyard. If it was a creature card, that player loses 1 life. Okay. So we typically see these little slightly overcosted flyers in black. This is pretty normal. It's an insect horror, not a great thing. Not a great creature type, but fine. And I mean, it's playable. It's going to fill a curve if you need it, but it's nothing flashy. For me, it's a 2/5.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think, if it was a creature card, the player loses 1 life, most of the time you're trying to hit unearth things in this set, and most of them are creatures. Not all, but most of them. So you're going to get that a lot. Yeah, I like that around a 2/5, although, not going to lie, that thing looks a lot scarier than a 2/1.
Yeah, and this is bigger than the dude, for sure. Very scary.
by a lot. Like a little bee can sting you and be like at least a 1/1 or a 2/1. That thing should be much more than that.
Absolutely. I mean, that stinger would just like rip you apart. But
yeah.
Real quick, want to address a comment in the chat. Someone says that it's a draft card. Everything in this set review is a draft card. This is all limited oriented. So basically everything has a home for the most part, and we are only discussing limited. All right, we have a Clay Revenant. We have a 1 mana 1/2. It's a golem artifact that when it enters the battlefield, it enters tapped. You can pay 3, 2 and a black, return it from your graveyard to your hand. I love these sort of skeleton-y idiots that allow you to interact with your sacrifice mechanics. It allows you to re-trigger your 3 mana CMC or less ETB things. I think this is going to find a home in a lot of decks.
Yeah, these cards always find homes. This one's a little bit worse just because a lot of times they come back into play, and also they don't enter tap from your hand usually, only from the graveyard. So it's a little bit worse, but it's also colorless, so that's partly part of why, I would imagine.
The other thing is I think it actually has a little bit more synergy this set than it typically does because it's an artifact. It's going to trigger a ton of things, like the Flying Artificer card. The other thing is that there is an archetype of 3 CMC or less in this color. So between those two types of synergies, this card is going to hit way harder than it typically does, which is why I can see that drawback. It is going to be a situational card. Not every deck will want it, but there will be quite a few that do. So it's pretty close to a split rating, but it's probably just a fine to say it's a 2 in most decks.
Yeah, the other thing we need to find out as we go through the set review is how many sacrifice effects there are. Like when you have something like a Bone Splinters, these cards are great.
Absolutely. Or sometimes you just have
that is there.
Or you just have cards like in the last set we had the Hurler Giant, which a Hurler Cyclops where you could just sack it and do damage. Like things like that are just great payoffs for these. Okay, so I'm going to give it a 2.
Yeah, I'm right there with you.
All right, next we have Corrupt. We have a 6 mana sorcery. It deals damage to any target equal to the number of swamps you control. You gain life equal to the damage dealt this way. So it's another one of those payoff cards that allow you to, have one or very heavy one-color decks. And 6 mana is always a little on the high side for me for removal. It's also sorcery speed, but you do also gain the life, which is a nice bonus. But for me, this is like the lower end of removal. I often will run one of these. We haven't actually seen one in a while, but black usually had some sort of like 6-ish mana idiot spell. But again, I hope we can find better removal for our decks. I think this is like a 2/5.
Yeah, I think I'm scarred a little bit from the first time this card was printed in Urza Saga, where triple Urza Saga draft, you could literally have 3 or 4 players at the table draft mono black. It was that good.
Oh, wow.
Between cards like this was that common back then, plus Pestilence, which was also a common, which just let you completely control the board. You had decks where this was your win con, just like 3 or 4 of these. So I'm a little scarred from that, but this format's not going to be that heavy monocolor. So I think I'm with you closer on that like 2.5 range.
The other thing is just removal's gotten better. So
Agreed.
Even if you do have things that are monocolor, like kill a thing for 6 mana is still kind of on the high side at this point. Yes, you gain some life too, but yeah, that's going to be still pretty hefty in comparison to... It's not as drastic a difference as what we probably saw back then as well.
True. You do get the flexibility here of killing your opponent with it.
That's true. I actually didn't even notice that said you could hit a player. In my head, I said, I said to any target, but in my head, it was just creatures. So that's a little bit nicer. So yeah, it's like a 2/5 for me. It's going to be fine playable removal if you can't find, premium murder stuff. But I think Yanks is right. This is probably going to play a little higher than that.
I'm hoping Manatee clips off the phrase premium murder stuff.
Why?
Because I feel like that's perfect out of context.
Oh, poop. All right, Diabolic Intent, 2 mana for a rare sorcery. As an additional cost to cast this spell, sacrifice a creature. We found a place for our golem. Search your library for a card, put that card into your hand, then shuffle. I don't like it. This is a constructed thing. I don't like sacking a creature to get a creature, plus paying a tax, plus a card. No thank you.
Yeah, tutors just typically are not good in limited, right? If you add the mana cost of the tutor to whatever you're getting, you're probably not getting that great of a card. And you've spent a card, in this case, 2 cards to get it. So It's just, sure, like original demonic tutor, just 2 mana, get anything. Yeah, that's pretty good. But there's a reason they don't print those things anymore.
Yeah, and even in limited, a lot of times the thing you're getting is just like a 4-mana 4/4 because your deck is also kind of shitty. So like you need to have good cards, like really premium game-winning cards in your deck to make these worth it, and you kind of want more than one because you might draw them out of order and then you feel bad. So I think this is for me a 1. I don't see that I'm playing this. If I end up with 2 big bombs, sure, but I'm not interested.
Yeah, I feel the only way I'm playing this is, like you said, a couple bombs, or if I've got some very weird build-around deck that really needs a certain card on the battlefield.
Okay.
But, that deck is probably pretty glass cannon-y to begin with, so...
Disciples of Gris, 6 mana for a 4/4 Phyrexian human. That says when it enters the battlefield, search your library for up to 3 artifact cards and put them into your graveyard, then shuffle. So this is a good synergistic thing for the scavenge ability. Or I'm sorry, the unearth ability. I don't know why I said scavenge. It comes into play. It's a little body on its own. It's, a fine body. It's a little overcosted here for a 4/4, but being able to then trigger some good unearth ETB effects could be really cool. If you have sacrifice abilities for those after you've recast them, then you get huge payoffs. So this feels like a synergy card, but...
Yeah. If you have the right cards in your deck, this can play as like a 6-mana 4/4 draw 3.
Yep.
I mean, not quite that good because you're getting cards for unearth that don't stay, but you're gaining significant resources with this card.
Yes.
But you need quality unearth cards to make that relevant.
Or you need a lot of sacrifice things that want those things to happen, or the when is it cast 3 mana CMC cards that trigger it, or 3 mana cards that ETB?
I believe the ones I've seen were generally ETB, but we haven't seen all of them yet.
So it could just be cool payoffs for some of your other cards to bring these things back, plus you get the unearth as a bonus to swing for a turn, and you triggered another thing. So yeah, not every deck will want this, but there will certainly be some that do. And I think there's probably a couple incidental things that, black also just might be able to recur. A good artifact that doesn't have unearth, but for the most part, I think the average deck's not interested. 1.5?
Yeah.
And then it's going to play probably like a 3 in the build-around deck. Disfigure. This is a 1-mana instant.
Which figure?
Disfigure. Are you making fun of me?
No, I'm just hoping Airball's listening.
Oh my goodness. Disfigure is a 1-mana instant. Target creature gets -2/-2 until end of turn. Fine removal, it's instant speed, it's going to kill actually a fair number of things. A little less valuable in these sets where things come back so easily. You end up getting a lot less value for your cheap costed removal spells, but I mean, I still think this is a 3.
Yeah, solid removal. Doesn't hit everything, but it doesn't have to at 1 mana.
Great. Dreams of Steel and Oil, a 1-mana sorcery. For target opponent reveals their hand, you choose an artifact or creature card from it, then choose an artifact or creature card from their graveyard. Exile the chosen card. The chosen cards. Okay, so it does say creature or artifact, which is going to hit a lot of things in this set, and I typically don't like the non-creature ones, so this is more playable than usual, but I still think this is sideboardy for cards that, for decks that have the unearth abilities.
Yeah, I'm upset to have to put Duress as my 23rd card. I wouldn't really be upset to have to play this as my 23rd card.
Agreed.
It hits more, a lot of times these Exile ones cost 2 mana, and this is only 1. And it's not completely dead late game because you can at least snipe an unearth card out of the graveyard, maybe. So, yeah, it's still not great, but I'll put this in my main deck as opposed to other versions of this effect that I won't.
I'm going to call this a 1.5. You can play it if you're desperate for a final card, but I will say it is a pretty hefty sideboard card that's going to come in handy against some of these more graveyard-dependent decks. I'm happy to have 2 of these in my board for every draft that I do.
Yep, and to answer a question from chat, the opponent's graveyard does not have to have an artifact or creature to cast this. The only target on the card is the opponent.
Nice. All right. Dredging Claw, 2 mana for an artifact equipment. It gets +1/+0 and has menace. And whenever a creature enters the battlefield from your graveyard, you may attach the claw for free. And it's only a 2 mana equip. That's, not terrible. And it does make your unearthed creatures actually get in for some sweet damage. Go ahead.
So one of the things that's sometimes frustrating with things like Unearth is, if you unearth like a 3/1 and it's going to go away, you just can't attack with it into like a single 1/4, something like that. At least here it makes their combat awkward between menace. It might help you get some other things through. So yeah, this is some decent value if you have unearthed creatures.
Absolutely. Rating wise, I don't think it's going to be good in every deck, but it's probably borderline playable in anything. So I'm going to give it like a 2. It's probably like a 1.5 and a 2.5 for Unearth. So I'm just going to put it in the middle.
Yeah, I think 2 is pretty good here.
I don't think it's quite strong enough of a difference to bother giving it a split.
No.
All right, Emergency Weld. We have a 2 mana sorcery. Return target artifact or creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Create a 1/1 colorless soldier artifact creature token. It still blows my mind that they're colorless artifact soldiers. Holy smokes. That is super flavorful. Yeah, this is kind of a 2-for-1-ish. Like normally we pay an extra 1 mana, but you get 2 creatures out of the yard. This gives you a relevant creature type and artifact, which is relevant. So this is very playable to me. It's going to be more playable when you have high quality creatures. If my best hope is I'm getting like a 3 mana 3/3 out, then not super interested. I'd rather have something else like a removal spell or whatever, but I think it's fine.
Yeah, the token's relevant creature type. 2 mana is fine for this effect, especially because there are some non-creature artifacts you might want to get back. So a little extra flexibility as opposed to what this sometimes is nice. Yeah, it's not exciting, but it's a decent card.
I like it at like, it's a 2, I think, if you don't want the human soldiers. It's probably like a 2/5 if you do. I think it's like a 2.
I think it's probably a 2.
Excellent. Fateful Handoff, 3 mana for a sorcery. A lot of sorceries in black. Draw cards equal to the mana value of target artifact or creature you control. An opponent gains control of that permanent. Ugh. So if you don't have one, if this is top decked, you get to do nothing. And then you have to give it to them, and you have to hope you drew cards to value that, so you have to have like a crappy thing.
Yeah, it's like a crappy expensive thing, ideally.
Yeah, I'm not into it.
I guess if you have enough mana, you can make this work with Unearth. You give them the Unearth thing, and then it gets exiled at end of turn.
Okay.
I mean, that's expensive.
Yeah. I mean, some of the Unearths are actually cheaper than their cost because so that's maybe not bad. But yes, you still need a crap ton of mana and a crap ton of Unearth, and feels pretty bad when you top deck it not in a good spot. I don't like this card. I think it's a 1.
I think it's a 1 as well, although the flavor text is fantastic for anybody that's read the book, because that's straight out of the Brothers War book. And it's the moment when, if you remember one of the cards we had early where the guy's carrying the Silex.
Mm-hmm.
He gets injured, and Ashnod, who's the redhead in the back there, steals it and is carrying it around, and the big final battle occurs at Argoth, and she takes it and gives it to Tawnos to give to Urza, who then, the memories of the land is basically supposed to be mana. That's what mana is. It's tied to the land.
I'm getting, like, the first couple of stories were not confusing, but now I'm starting to get confused. Because, like, your story was like, this guy has the thing, she took the thing to give the thing to the other guy, but the other guy wasn't there, so this guy took it, but gave it to the other guy, who was the guy that we were talking about the first time. I'm just like, wait, what? Who has what now? So things are getting a little bit more confusing.
I mean, it went from Loran to Ashnod to Tawnos to Urza. That's not that weird, right?
Okay, so it's a 1. We're going to move to Grix Caress, 3 mana for a source. Gix. There's no R in there. Gix Caress, 3 mana for a sorcery. Target opponent reveals their hand. You choose a non-land card from it. That player discards a card. And then you can also create a Power Stone with it. Yay, Power Stones. 3 mana is a little a little hard. I hate these kinds of spells because they feel like such bad top decks.
3 mana is just too much for this effect. I mean, I would much rather run the 1 mana one we just saw.
I agree. Yep, this is a sideboard card for late games, heavy bombs when your opponent is like dropping huge Prismari type spells, then sure, but like, nah, I'm not really interested. I think it's a 1.
Yeah, this is the sort of thing I bring in sealed, like if there's just a bomb I have no other answer for. And I maybe hope to get lucky.
All right. Well, I'm so far very underwhelmed with black.
Mtgnerdgirl is proudly sponsored by CoolStuffInc.com. When you use promo code MNG5 at checkout, you'll receive a free, exclusive Mtgnerdgirl Vampire token, as well as 5% off your entire order. Show your support for her content and get this free bonus by using the code MNG5. Only at CoolStuffInc.com. Cool stuff in stock.
Moving on, we have Gris.
Gixes.
Okay. No!
You definitely are thinking of Grixis, which is the problem.
Why is there not an R in this card? It's so frustrating. Okay, I'm going to start all over. Okay? Shh.
Would you like me to read the ones that start with Gix?
Well, we're almost done, but...
There's a few more coming.
Sure. I'll let you do it. Go for it. So start with moving on.
Yep. Moving on, our next card here is Gix's Command. It's 3 black for a sorcery in the command cycle. You choose 2. Put 2 +1/+1 counters on up to one creature. It gains lifelink until end of turn. Destroy each creature with power 2 or less. Return up to 2 creature cards from your graveyard to your hand. And each opponent sacrifices a creature with the highest power among creatures they control.
Each of these are pretty flexible. I like this.
Yeah, these all seem pretty good. The destroy each creature with power 2 or less probably won't come up that often, but when it does, it's really good. You get a 2-for-1 by returning creatures to your hand. Sacrifice effects aren't always the greatest in Limited, but when they force them to get rid of their biggest thing, that's pretty good.
It's a pretty big swing if you return 2 creatures from your graveyard and destroy their biggest thing. That's a pretty big swing. It's also kind of important to note that these will resolve in the order that they are. So you can put 2 +1/+1 counters onto your smallest thing and blow out their board, which is pretty sweet.
Yes. Yep.
I like that. That's a nice little sneaky touch there. But yeah, I think this card is fantastic. And honestly, I feel like the power of each individual thing is not that great, but the flexibility of all of them and all of them adding up together to be quite powerful. Any 2 of these abilities is quite strong. This feels game-changing to me, so I would be tempted to give this a full 4.
Yeah, I think it's a 4. It's really strong.
All right.
All right. Next, we have Gix, Yawgmoth Praetor. 1 black for a 3/3 legendary Phyrexian Praetor. Whenever a creature deals combat damage to one of your opponents, its controller may pay 1 life. If they do, they draw a card. Then 4 black, so 7 mana, discard X cards, exile the top X cards of target opponent's library. You may play lands and cast spells from among cards exiled this way without paying their mana costs.
Okay. I mean, it's a good on-rate creature on its own, and then whenever a creature deals combat damage to you or one of your opponents, its controller may pay 1 if you do. Okay, so this is interesting.
It's worded awkwardly because of Commander.
Yes.
And multiplayer. In Limited, it just means whenever one of your creatures deals damage to them, you can pay a life and draw a card.
But it says if they do, they draw a card. So it punishes...
No, they referring to its controller, which is your creature in this case. So
oh. Okay.
It's worded that way, so if you play it in Commander and somebody else attacks one of the other players, they can draw cards.
I see. Whenever a creature deals combat damage to one of your opponents. So in Heads Up, it doesn't matter because it's only your opponents that this can trigger on.
Yep.
Ah, okay. I was like, why is this worded this way? Like, why is this overly complicated for no reason? And I was missing that.
And as usual, it's because Commander's to blame.
Yeah. It's interesting, though. It does sort of incentivize people to not attack you in Commander. It's actually kind of a sweet card in Commander for that reason, because it's like not only helping you get cards, but also just encouraging people. Anyway, this is not a limited commander set review, but it's cool. And in heads up, it doesn't matter. It's a great rate creature. Sure. The other mana cost is quite expensive, so it's going to have a lot to do with Power Stones, because it's an ability. You can use that. I had to think about it twice in my head, because Power Stones are lame. Exile cards from your opponent's library is pretty sweet. I don't think this is going to be a non-factor, but it is very expensive. So I'm going to kind of not rate this a ton on the 7 mana ability. What do you think rating-wise, Yanks?
I think this is a 4/5.
Okay.
I mean, again, you can bolt it and it doesn't do anything, so that's why it's not a 5. But, you know, if you can play it pre-combat and attack, you know, unlike a lot of these triggers, a lot of times like an Edric or something, or not Edric, some of the more recent ones they've printed, it's like if whenever you deal damage to your opponent, you can draw, but you only get to draw once. This is for every one of your creatures you can do.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I was going to say, because I was agreeing with the 4.5, is that our 4s can win the game if left alone, because they can't really do much for that turn. They don't affect the board they come in, the turn they come in. This one actually can if you have a board state that can get any attackers through. So it's not quite game-changing, because it might not do that, but sometimes it very well could. And if you draw 2 cards off of this, you're feeling pretty fantastic.
Yeah, for sure. And like I said, the second paragraph will come up. Not a lot, but it'll happen.
Yep, absolutely. So 4.5.
Yep, and story time on this card.
Sure.
Gix, he shows up in a number of books early in Magic, but when Urza and Mishra, early into Brothers War, they split the Power Stone, which becomes the Might Stone and Weak Stone, which is a card in this set. What it does is it unlocks a portal to Phyrexia. And Gix is the demon, one of the inner circle, Yawgmoth's inner circle in Phyrexia, that comes through and sort of starts corrupting people. We saw disciples of Gix earlier into like machine worshippers, and he's the one who eventually corrupts Mishra into sort of a Phyrexian servant that forces Urza to eventually destroy him, even though kind of throughout the whole war he had hoped there would be some sort of reconciliation, but he realized he wasn't him anymore. He was basically a machine.
Sorry, I had to unmute. Okay. Your stories are getting more and more interesting the further we go. They seemed light and frothy at first, but now it's getting like into the nitty-gritty.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, we've gotten Gix continues is a big name because he continues to show up in the next book, at least the next book in the series as well.
All right.
As sort of the main antagonist for Urza.
Gixian Infiltrator. Don't mean to cut you off. Want to keep him at about
an
hour.
You're good.
2 mana Phyrexian Human. 2/1. Whenever you sacrifice another permanent, put a +1/+1 counter on this. That's cool. You only need 1 counter for this to be a great rate, but you have to have something to sacrifice, right?
Yeah, and we haven't seen anything that naturally sacrifices itself, like a treasure token or a clue or a food.
Or a card that wants to incentivize you sacking the like recurring creatures.
Yeah.
So any sort of outlet, I think, that gives you a bonus on its own that just makes this static ability add up over time is pretty fantastic. So in a normal deck, it's like a 1.5 because it's a bit low on rate. But if you just, even if it's just a couple, it doesn't need to be a sack deck exactly, but just a few triggers where you can consistently get a trigger out of this, then you're pretty happy to have it as a 2, I think.
Yeah, it's between that 1-5-2 range, depending on what we see, especially in the rest of black, since that's where you tend to see the most sacrifice effects.
We did see a blue card that said sacrifice a Power Stone, basically, and get 2 Power Stones. That would actually trigger this, right?
It would. That card's terrible, though.
Agreed, but I'm just saying, like,
Right.
It's an idea of a thing that is, like, maybe in your deck anyway that just does this, which is kind of
agreed.
Cool.
And we're in an artifact set, and red tends to have some sacrifice artifacts things, so we may see some cards that enable this in red as well.
Gixian Puppeteer. This is a 4 mana Phyrexian Warlock. It's a 4/3 that says whenever you draw your second card each turn, each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. Okay? Whenever it dies, return another target creature card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. So this is insane. It's so much value. It's a decent rate on its own. It's going to slowly be draining because it's working with a mechanic that's built into the set, and gives you a nice little trigger for another mechanic that's built into the set. This card is fantastic. This is a solid 4.
Yeah, a lot of times cards that lean into archetypes like this are like de facto 2-color cards, but this really isn't because it works in both blue-black and black-white, and it's just on rate on its own.
Yeah, and the cool thing about this too is that like we've seen a lot of synergy cards that are monocolor that belong in those 2-color archetypes. So there's a good chance that you could be, you know, not even like if you're just mono black, you'll probably be triggering both of these at some rate. Not a huge rate, but probably find things that will trigger both of these.
Agreed.
All right. Gixian Skullflayer. Are you proud of me? I figured it out, the word. We did it.
Told you there were a lot of them still coming.
3 mana for a Phyrexian Human Assassin. It's a 2/3. It's on rate. At the beginning of your upkeep, if there are 3 or more creature cards in your graveyard, put a +1/+1 counter on this. That's going to happen over time no matter what. So I like this. It's a vanilla 2/3 the turn you play it. It fills your curve, and it's slowly going to start to get more and more threatening the longer it stays on the battlefield, which is exactly what I like my early things to do. So yes, this to me is like a 2/5.
Yeah, I think it's right in that range. It might even be better, depending on how sort of slow the format is.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I can see that.
It just slowly gets bigger and bigger, and they just need to kill it before it gets out of hand.
Yep. Gnawing Vermin, 1 mana for a 1/1 rat that says when it enters the battlefield, target player mills 2 cards. When Gnawing Vermin dies, target creature you don't control gets -1/-1 till end of turn. Okay, I'm into that. It's a great sacrifice target. It helps fuel your graveyard if need be. I mean, it's filler, but I typically like it when this card makes them discard. I think those are always my favorite kinds of rats, but I mean, this is going to be playable.
Yeah, it's interesting because you see that -1/-1 effect has been on black goblins more recently. And the rats, you're right, usually have a discard effect. So it's a little bit of a different twist here, but card's fine. You know, you could have some self-mill synergies in some decks in this format. So, you know, I'm not excited to play this
2?
card, but I will find spots for it. Yeah, I think a 2 is right.
Great. All right, Go for the Throat, 2 mana for an instant speed, destroy target non-artifact creature. Normally I'm like, oh, this is fine, because there's not that many artifacts or whatever. Like, that might actually be very relevant. This is like, sort of in, was it the first Dominaria, where there was like kill non-legendary creature? And that actually really came up a lot, and I was like, oops, I kind of wish this was something else. But this is still going to be a good card.
Yeah, I mean, this card was good enough for Modern at one point. You know, in Jund, but yeah, the non-artifact stuff is super relevant here. That being said, I think it's still a 4.
All right. We have a Goring Warplow, 6 mana or 2 mana for a 1/1 or a 5/4. Sorry, a little dyslexic with my numbers. It has Prototype. You can cast it for the 6 or the 2. It's either a 1/1 or a 5/4, and it just has Death Touch. 2 mana, 1/1 Death Toucher is kind of normal. We have to have a good reason for it. It's an artifact to trigger some artifact things, and if you draw it late, you just get a little flexibility there. I like the Prototype mechanic. I love the flexibility and the casting cost. Neither cost is great, but again, it allows you to fill that curve in a very clean way that doesn't punish you later. You can be a little more liberal on the 2-drop slot.
Yeah, I think both halves of this card are probably 2, but having both of them together maybe makes it a 2/5.
Yeah, and it's also going to depend on like the artifact triggers that you want to be doing. Any sort of like artifact recursion would be cool. To me, it's still a little overcosted. I'm still probably putting this at a 2, but I can see it being a 2/5 if you have any sort of artifact stuff.
Agreed.
All right, Gruesome Realization, colorless black for you choose 1. You draw 2 cards and you lose 2 life. That's pretty normal. And creatures your opponents control get -1 till end of turn. It's sorcery speed, so it's no combat trick, but it is a post-combat thing, which is cool. We've seen a fair number of 1/1s. It's going to clear out those soldier decks. So this is like a mini Choking Miasma, which is actually fine, I think, because there's so many X1s in the set compared to normal. Or it is a 3-mana dark bargaining type effect. We usually see that at 3 mana, but it doesn't usually cost 2 black. So both of these cards, both of these sides of the cards usually cost 3, but they're a little more easy to cast. I think this is fine. This seems very, very playable to me. What do you think, Yanks?
I always like having the option to put the second effect on this card into my deck, whether it be a -1/-1 or deal 1 damage to everything, because it just does come up occasionally enough that I want it, but it's never good enough to play on its own. So being able to stick this on a card draw spell and then you're playing against blue-green ramp where the 1/1 doesn't do anything. Okay, great. You don't have a dead card, but you still have access to it against the soldier decks.
Yeah, I mean, anytime a card has this much flexibility, I'm always on board, and it gets a nice little boost from me. So I like this card. It's probably like a 2/5. I'm going to play the first one pretty often.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think it's a 2/5, and you're pretty happy having it.
All right. I will let you take this one.
Gurgling Anointer. It's a 3-mana, 2 and a black for a 1/3 flyer, Phyrexian Horror. Whenever you draw your second card each turn, put a +1/+1 counter on Gurgling Anointer. And when this dies, return another target creature card with mana value less than or equal to its power from your graveyard to the battlefield. Less than or equal to Gurgling Anointer's power.
Okay. This is the second time we're seeing this sort of ability. One was for sacrifices, and one is now for drawing a second card, which is very much a mechanic that we're expecting to see a ton of in the set. So I think that's fine. You really only need one trigger on this for this to be an on-rate creature. What are you thinking, Yanks? Actually, it's flying. I didn't even notice it was flying, actually.
Flying.
It is just fine on its own. You one trigger and you're really, really happy.
Yeah, you need one trigger to probably get value out of the second half to at least get a 2-drop back. But because you probably don't have many ones, but yeah, I mean, even if you can't get that, you're not happy if you can't get that. You're like, all right, this is fine. But if you can get this to a 2/4 or a 3/5, you're thrilled.
Yeah, absolutely. And one trigger on this, and I agree. I think you're fine. This to me seems like a 3.
I agree. 3, and they'll probably play better than that in the blue-black decks.
All right. Hostile Negotiations, 4 mana for an instant that says exile the top 3 cards of your library in a face-down pile. Then exile the top 3 cards of your library in another face-down pile. Look at the cards in each pile. Then turn a pile of your choice face up, and your opponent chooses one of the piles. Put that pile into your hand and the other into your graveyard. You lose 3 life. This is sort of the opposite of what one of the rares did in the last set. It was a blue rare that lets your opponent look at 3 cards, put any number face up and face down, and let you choose the piles. This is the opposite of that, but it's, pretty hefty value. At instant speed, you can cast this end of turn, which is really cool with removal and counter spells, and you're going to get to draw 3 cards. And it might just be that I think those packs would be pretty close to even more often than not. So it's going to be good value. What do you think, Yanks?
Yeah, they keep trying to make different versions of, Fact or Fiction, dating back to Invasion. 3 and a blue instant. That's one of the better card draw spells ever printed at the time. This is worse, both because you lose life, but also because your opponent gets the ultimate choice, which is always slightly worse. You can try to play some mind games, but at the end of the day, it's still a 4-mana draw 3. And it's not like they get to choose the 3 worst. They just get to choose which pile they think is worse, and they're not always going to be right.
Yeah, and I think if it were me, if I've got 6 cards to choose from, I'm probably, unless I'm down to play some mind games, like if they're really bad, if it's like all land and 1 bomb, sure, I'm going to try to play some mind games there. But I think for the most part, I would just kind of stack things kind of evenly. Right?
Well, you don't get to. It's a pile of 3 and a pile of 3. You don't get to organize them.
Oh, that's right.
You just get to pick which one is face up.
Okay. Well, I mean, any 3 cards off the top, I'm pretty happy to get most of the time.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I still think it's fine.
Yeah,
Rating-wise. For instant speed, 2.5.
I'm a little higher on it. I think I've got it as a 3, but I love card draw, so that's not surprising.
Agreed. I was actually a little higher on it, and then I think you talked me out of it when you were like, "Oh, you can't do the thing, and you lose the life." Oh. But yeah, my biggest concern is that most of the things we've seen in Black have all been sorcery speed, so I'm not seeing a ton of love for the instant speed stuff in the set when I want my card draw to be instant so that I can keep the flexibility open throughout the turn, where it's like that's a lot less relevant right now. But yeah, 2.5, 3, I like it.
Yeah, we did see not in Black, admittedly, but we have seen some decent flash stuff so far.
Yeah, true, but you have to be in that color. So
you have to be in that color. Yeah,
kind of rating it based on what Black can bring to the table, which so far isn't much at instant speed. Killzone Acrobat, 3 mana for a 3/2 soldier, relevant creature type. Whenever Killzone Acrobat attacks, you may sacrifice another creature or artifact. If you do, Killzone Combat gains flying until end of turn. Yeah, it's pretty vanilla as is, so it's fine. I do like that, we're starting to see that we're getting random Power Stones being made, and I like that some of these cards sort of have like built-in uses for them should you not need them for like the big ramp stuff, and that's kind of nice, but I don't think I'm going to be wanting to sack a ton of things to give this flying. What do you think, Yanks?
No, I think I just have this as a 2.
I agree. I like it as a 2 as well.
And also, let's be real, right? That guy looming over you with the spear is not nearly as terrifying as that giant insect.
Agreed. Yeah. That insect was actually horrifying. The set design did not do the art justice.
Agreed.
All right, now we have a It's not mysteries. That's what I keep wanting to say. Misery's Shadow. 2 mana for a 2/2 shade that says if a creature an opponent controls would die, exile it instead. For 1 mana, it gets +1/+1 till end of turn. Only 1 colorless mana? Well, that's cheap.
Hello, Power Stones.
That's super cheap. Wow.
This card is absurd.
And it gets to exile their stuff. Wow, this card's doing a lot. It doesn't fly, but thank gosh.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, this is kicking some butt. I mean, it's still a teeny creature, and it doesn't do anything when it comes into play, really. So I'm like, and you have to dump mana into it every turn. So I mean, I'm not super high on it, but it's very good.
Yeah, I'm pretty high on this. The exile thing is real in this set.
That's true.
And you don't have to pump mana into it every turn. You just have to be able to pump mana into it.
Yeah.
And it gets through, and then you just don't play your thing.
And it's colorless mana. It's not even black, which is insane.
Yeah, I think this card is really good. Now, you're right. It doesn't provide any value at all if it just gets shocked. And it's easy to kill, but that's because it only costs 2. So, yeah, I don't know. I think this is really good.
What are you thinking rating-wise?
I'm somewhere between 3.5 and 4.
Yeah, I think I'm in the 3.5 range. I'm hesitant to give it a ton of credit for the Unearth because not every card is going to have that.
Yeah.
So it's going to play up to a 4 against that deck, but not, I'm trying to think of how many decks does that just kill. Most decks will have a few random Unearth, but an Unearth themed deck won't be that common, I don't think.
No, and I don't expect that to kill it. It's just some incidental value that you get against a couple things, in a game maybe.
So sounds like we're about a 0.5 point off on that card. Not too bad.
Yeah.
Moment of Defiance. We have a 3 mana instant. Target creature gets +2/+1 and gains lifelink until end of turn and draws a card. Ooh, our combat tricks are starting to draw a lot more, and I think that's because Wizards realized we weren't playing them.
Yeah, I think I'm still not playing this one.
I might. I like these sort of cycle cards. I'm not super high on it by any means, but it'll see some play as a 23rd playable card.
Yeah, 3 mana is a lot. Like, this doesn't... It can help you win some combats because of the +1 on toughness, but it doesn't have First Strike or Death Touch or Indestructible or anything like that. So it's not... A lot of times it's not even going to, trade up. Yeah, I just think you're asking for it to be blown out with this card. 3 mana is a lot. It's not easy to keep up. Like you said in a couple cards ago, we haven't seen a ton of instant speed stuff in black. This is nice in blue-black, for the 2 cards a turn thing on your turn, but unless I'm getting a lot of those triggers, I don't think I'm playing this card.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm not super happy with it, but I'm sure it'll be one of my 23rd playable crap combat tricks that makes it into probably a third or half my black decks as a one of, because I'm a little light on playables. But yeah, definitely not something I'm looking to pick up for sure. No One Left Behind, a 5-mana sorcery. The spell costs 3 less to cast if it targets a creature card with mana value 3 or less. Return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. It's only a 1/1. I'm sad.
Yeah, it's a 1/1 that at least acknowledges that a lot of times the problems with these cards are you're trading down on mana. So if you're getting a 3-drop, you're still trading up on mana because it's only going to cost you 2. So it mitigates that a little bit. But yeah, it's not great.
I'm not really running this. I think it's like a 1.5.
I think this fits just like every card like this always does. If you have a couple bombs that you really want to bring back, then sure. It's a little better maybe in this set because of Prototype, where you're playing something cheap for the Prototype cost. It dies, and then you can bring it back as its giant form.
Yeah.
But that's about it.
I've definitely run recursion spells, and there are some decks that want them with cards like Outrider or silly things that like when you have Bone Rattle to bring back Outrider and you can kind of cycle through things, but the average deck I think is not interested in paying mana for a 1/1.
Yeah, it depends on what. It's so highly dependent on not like what your deck is trying to do, but on the very specific cards in your.
Yeah, power level matters with these cards, 100%. Overwhelming Remorse, 5 mana for an instant. Target. This spell costs 1 less for each creature card in your graveyard. Exile target creature or planeswalker. Oh, I mean, at instant speed, 5 mana, I'm down to just pay 5. You don't even need a discount.
Yeah, this is absurd.
I mean, this is very, very powerful. Instant speed, let's just say it normally costs you 4. Exile any creature. Yeah, this, I mean, our premium removal is usually a 4, but that feels like it's kind of not doing this justice.
Yeah, just check boxes. Instant speed, only single black, 5 mana, or most of the time, much less. And exile and unconditional. Yeah. What would you not like about this card? And it's a common.
Yeah, removal is getting spicy and limited, let me tell you. All right, so a 4 for our premium removal. Painful Quandary, a 5 mana enchantment that says whenever an opponent casts a spell, that player loses 5 life unless they discard a card. That says opponent. That's insane.
Yeah, like this card reads like at first, I'm just thinking about it. I'm like, this is 5 mana, do nothing. I hate it, but wait, they're just gonna die in like 3 turns.
Yeah, or they'll just never have even if they're it's sort of like one of those things where normally it's like, oh, I can't discard anymore, so it's fine, right? Like Liliana's Tick Up, each opponent discards a card. At a certain point, that's no longer relevant. Here, it is, because if they want to cast anything, they have to. You just 2-for-1 them every time. They have to discard in order to cast the thing, or they take the life and die. They have no choice in the matter, which is kind of crazy. So I think this is very playable. It's one of those things where if you're super far behind, it's going to feel real, real bad. If you're at even or ahead, it's going to absolutely crush them and finish the job.
Yeah, this is a reprint from Scars, and I didn't play at that point, so I don't know how good this was in Limited there. But these types of spells I really generally don't like, but this feels pretty good.
Yeah. I mean, I'm tempted to give it a 4, because if it's left to do its thing, it's going to kill him. That's the whole point of the 4 thing, right? It's like if they can't deal with it, they're going to eventually just die.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it's going to depend on how fast the format is. If it's fast, and you just may not be able to afford to spend 5 mana to not do anything.
Absolutely. And in that case, they're able to do something, which is kill you before it does its thing. And that's the best form of removal. Absolutely. So I think it has the potential of a 4, but you're right. It might not get there.
Yeah, I think I want to give this, because they do have the option to just discard, like, and they can play around with that a little bit. I think I've probably got this at like a 3, but it probably plays as at least a 4 in Seal.
Absolutely. Okay, moving on. We have the Phyrexian Flesh Gorger, 7 mana or 3 mana, and it comes into play as either a 7/5 or a 3/3, but either way it's going to have Menace and Lifelink and Ward pay life equal to its power. Oh, that's kind of neat. That's a big ability.
Yeah, 3 mana, 3/3, Ward pay 3, or it got 7. You're gonna have a real hard time killing this as a 7/5 stomaching paying 7.
Yeah. In addition to it, like, it's just 3 mana, 3/3 with Menace and Lifelink is bananas.
Yeah.
That's great. It's just not going to snap win you the game, but like that's quite powerful. What are you thinking rating wise, Yanks?
I think it's like a 4.
I like it. We'll give that a 4. I agree. We have Power Stone Fracture, 2 mana for a sorcery that says an additional cost to cast, sacrifice an artifact or creature, destroy target creature or planeswalker. So it's an expensive Bone Splinters that allows you to also sacrifice a Power Stone, for example. And also lets you hit a planeswalker, so that's fine. Sorcery speed, as Bone Splinters normally is. I don't mind the extra mana for the flexibility. This card is fine. These are usually like 3/5s, but we're seeing a lot of like the skeleton I guess it's a golem that comes back, which is cool. And also sacrificing a card that's been brought back to unearth is pretty like low pain. So I think this is good. I'm gonna still give this the pretty high rating. What do you think, Yanks?
Yeah, I think I usually think these are around a 3, and this is probably a 3/5 just because of the Power Stone option, and even not just sacrificing things that have come back from unearth, but sacrificing things with unearth is not great, but it's not as bad as sacrificing a full card because you can get it back.
Absolutely.
At least temporarily.
So are you thinking 3/5 or 4?
I think 3/5.
Yeah. I think
like it's just not in the same league as that other removal spell.
Oh, of course, not close. Honestly, if that thing wasn't so insane, I think because the Power Stone flexibility here of just being able to you discard like incidental things, I would be still tempted to give this a 4 with Unearth. But yeah, you're right. It's hard to put those two things next to each other and give them the same rating.
Yeah, I mean, we've done that in sets where they're both 4s, but those are just, it's not like this is worse, but close. Like, that one is just so good.
All right. Ravenous Gigamole? Jesus. It has this little star Gigamole nose. The little star mole nose. That's cute. 4 mana for a mole horror. Whenever it enters the battlefield, mill 3 cards. You may put a creature card from among the cards milled this way into your hand. If you don't, put a +1/+1 counter on the mole. Okay. I like that it's saying milled this way, so it doesn't go back and like retroactively hit things that have died, which is kind of nice. I think these things would be too powerful if it did that.
Yeah, we've seen kind of a cycle of this, at least in each of the colors so far, where it's mill 3 and then you can get something back, and if you don't, it gets bigger. Yeah, again, all of them have been okay, but not great. This is probably better than the others because you're more likely to hit a creature. I think like the blue one was a non-creature artifact or something like that.
Yeah, something. And the worst case scenario is a 4 mana 3/4, which is vanilla playable.
Yeah.
So if you have a good reason to want other things into your graveyard, if you want to get this does kind of, it's like 1 extra mana for a creature, or you're getting the vanilla price. And if you hit a creature, it feels way higher than vanilla to me. So I think it's fine. It's probably like a 2/5.
Yeah, and you also have the option if you mill a creature, but the creature you mill you can't cast or it's not useful, you can decline and still get the counter.
Yeah, or unearth or something with a sacrifice option would be cool.
Yep, yeah, I think it's in that 2/5 slot.
Razor Lash Transmogrant? I feel like they're just messing with me at this point.
Transmigrant.
Transmigrant. Sure. 2 mana for a zombie 3/1. It can't block, and it gets, for 6 mana, you can return it from your graveyard to the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it. This ability costs 4 less to activate if opponent controls 4 or more non-basic lands. Probably not relevant in Limited, but 6 mana for a 4/2 recurring late game is kind of fine. It's cheap to cast early. Like, as it is, it's slightly below rate, but you can then bring it back later. I think this is okay.
Yeah, I mean, the ability is designed for, like, to be like a scrap heap scrounger and constructed. But, yeah, I mean, it's really just a 2 mana 3/1 that really late in the game you can get back.
Yep, I agree with that. So it gives you some, like, little incidental value, but it can't block, so I'm kind of still in that 2 range.
Yeah, I think it's in that 2 range. Again, something that's decent with sacrifice synergies as well.
Absolutely. We have a Scrapwork Rager, a 4 mana 2/2 Phyrexian Horror that says when it enters the battlefield, you draw a card and lose 1 life. And it has Unearth. So it's very similar to the little Phyrexian guy we saw in this last set, but costs 1 more, it's colorless, and you can actually bring it back to draw extra cards, which is cool. That art is so creepy, actually. Holy crap.
Yeah, I mean, the one we had was Phyrexian Rager. It's supposed to be the, almost a direct callback.
Yep. So, I mean, I think this card is good. I'm probably going to run it. 4 mana is a little steep for what I wanted to do, but the fact that you can bring it back twice is quite a lot of value.
Yeah, I think, to me at least, we saw in Dominaria United that Phyrexian Rager plays better than it reads. Those cards always tend to, and I think this will as well.
Absolutely. Rating?
I think I've got it at like a 3.
All right, 3 it is. I like that as well. We have a Thran Vigil, 2 mana for an enchantment that says whenever 1 or more artifacts and or creatures leave the graveyard during your turn, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. The fact that this is not a creature on its own makes me not like it. I'm okay with this ability, sort of the way it works with the set, because there's a lot of things that will interact with this, but you have to have other creatures in play for it to work with it, and I don't know, I'm not thrilled.
I mean, how many counters do you have to get before you've considered that you've gotten a card's worth of value here?
Yeah, a lot. I'm not.
And you can only get 1 per turn, so probably need 3 counters, and so that means at absolute best you're getting, if you play this on turn 2, you're getting value on like turn 6.
Yeah, I think this is not a limited thing, so I'm going to put this in the bracket of 1.
Agreed.
Thraxo Demon? Gosh damn it.
Sure.
They're just making things, I don't know, whatever. 2 mana for a 2/2 demon that says if you can pay 3, you can tap it, sacrifice another creature or artifact, draw a card. Ooh, this turns all your power stones into draw. I like that. This seems cool. And it's a bear on its own. This is fantastic. This is like a 3.
Yeah, I like this as a 3. You can even use the power stone you're going to sacrifice to help pay for it.
Yep, and you can sacrifice creatures at instant speed. Yeah, nothing wrong with this.
Yep, great with the skeleton, great with power stones. In worst case scenario, you've got a bear.
Absolutely. Just real quick, Jesse, Rachel, I know you just popped in. Welcome to the channel. We are doing a limited set review. So oftentimes 2/2s that do things are quite fantastic. You say the word.
Transmigrant Altar. It's a 3 mana artifact where you can pay black, tap, sack a creature, add 3 colorless mana, or 2 tap, sacrifice a creature, create a 3/3 colorless zombie artifact creature token, activate only as a sorcery. So again, kind of like we saw with Ashnod earlier, you're making these 3/3 zombies by getting rid of a creature. In this case, from play, so worse. And it's kind of a direct callback to Ashnod's Altar as well, with being able to sacrifice creatures to make mana.
Yeah. Can we just agree that the zombie's cute little I keep calling it a zombie skeleton, but the little golem that just keeps coming back,
The golem,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, it comes back into play tapped, and then you sacrifice it, and you make a 3/3, and then you bring it back to your hand, and then you play it tapped, and you make another thing. I mean, there's going to be some cute stuff here, but for the most part, I'm not super happy to just keep paying mana to sacrifice creatures to, like, maybe give them 1 point of toughness or power upgrades usually. So you've got to have some sort of engine for this. Probably the average deck is not going to be wanting to do that.
No, I mean, this is printed to give another option to Ashnod's Altar for Commander, mostly, I would think.
Yep. A lot of people saying non-artifact spells. I don't.
They're discussing what Power Stones are used for.
I see. If you guys missed the introduction to Brothers War, it's already up on YouTube, where Yanks and I go over new mechanics, returning mechanics, all the different draftable archetypes that you guys can play, as well as a couple of the like print runs, like the different lands or the different types of creatures that you'll see throughout the set, that there's like one of every color. So if you see something like that, we talk a lot about it. We also do a little bit of flavor for Brothers War and talk about the story and the plot and how this is progressing from like the Plane of Dominaria into the future sets. So if you guys missed that video, go back and check it out. It's already on the YouTube channel, and we're on black now. We're going to keep going all the way through the rest of the set tonight. So for me, Yanks, this is a 1. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I think it's a 1 as well.
All right, Transmogrant's Crown. I can't, there's too many words, too many letters. Transmogrant's Crown, 2 for an equipment that says equipped creature gets +2/+0. Whenever equipped creature dies, draw a card. Hello. You can equip it for 2 colorless or a black. So this really goes in the colorless pile, because I feel like I would actually maybe run this no matter what. If I'm in like blue, white soldier making business where all my soldiers are just going to get kept continuously flung at a bus, I think I might even play this.
Yeah, this card is fantastic. Yeah, I guess they put it in the black section because they put the one axe that equipped the soldiers for white in the white section. So, yeah, it's great in any deck. It's better in black. It's great with it's even better with Unearth.
What do you think in rating wise?
I kind of want to call this card a 4.
I'm on the fence between a 3, 5, and a 4, because you have to have kind of a heavy creature count for it to be super like dependable. And you also have to have like some creatures you kind of want to trade up with. If you're, if your deck is full of like, 4/4s or whatever, then it's kind of dirtily, but you still equip it and you still draw some cards and it feels pretty fantastic. So I will get on board with that 4 plan. It's going to win you the game if it's left to do its thing.
Yeah.
All right, moving on to a Trench Stalker. We have a 5 mana Beast Horror. It's a 4/5. See, this is reasonable words. As long as you've drawn 2 or more cards this turn, Trench Stalker has Death Touch and Lifelink. Ooh, this is a spicy one for the blue-black theme here.
Yeah, you don't all the time need Death Touch on a big thing, but 4/5 means you're probably trading for at least 2 things with Death Touch if you're attacking with it, plus getting some life. I mean, you can play this in any deck. Obviously, it's great, better in blue-black.
Yeah. Any deck is going to have some incidental draw 2 cards. Like, even if it's just 2 or 3, you could have a couple of like the artifact creature we just saw that draws you a card when it ETBs, like something like that, 1 or 2 of those sort of spells, and you're happy to do this. It's sort of a vanilla creature on its own as is, like a, 1.52, barely playable, but I think if you have 3 plus ways to trigger this and help them if you are actually in the blue-black that wants to do this, yeah, I think this is like a 2/5 for me.
Yeah, I think it's a 2/5, and it plays maybe even all the way up to a 3/5 in blue-black.
All right, so we got Arms Race, 4 mana for an enchantment.
That's red.
Oh, we're done. We did it. Black's over. Oh my god.
Black was the opposite of white, where everything was U and W. This ends at T.
The funny thing is I like at the beginning of this card, I looked at it and I was like, we're barely at the T's. Oh my god. But it's over. We did it. Okay. Thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to leave us a comment down below and let me know what you guys think of the color black. Don't forget, go back and check out the introduction and the other colors that are already up, and I'll be sure to continue posting these all week. Thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you in the next video.